Yeah. Hello. This is Yoko, and welcome to our first section session of the Enoch Club book club, and today is, I believe it's August 26th, 2022, and we're gonna do 10 chapters per session, and and LG is gonna be the lead. She's gonna lead the group and all that. So, and I'm going to give the mic to LG. LG,
Thank you, Yoko, and thank you everybody that can join and everyone that may listen to this on replay. It's my pleasure and also my passion. The Book of Enoch quickly became my passion. Um, I feel like it holds all of the answers that we need now at this very moment more than ever before. I do like to start with just validating the Book of Enoch. Right now, a lot of people are concerned with the extra volumes, the sealed books that have been found under the Vatican, and even part of the Dead Sea Scrolls that are still being cross referenced. But the Book of Enoch is different from all of those. And the reason that it's different is um, it has actually been verified. It was the first book found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I believe that was 1989. But even more than that, the Book of Enoch has always been in the Holy Bible in Ethiopia. It is part of their canon, it always has been. And the Book of Enoch, of course, precedes the New Testament. And a lot of the uh, credibility that has been lent so that we can postulate and make a strong statement that the Book of Enoch is inspired scripture is that in the New Testament, the disciples in the various books quote directly from the Book of Enoch, which matched with the scroll that was found. So I just like to preface everything with that. And before Yoko starts, I would like to tell you just a tiny bit about my journey to the Book of Enoch, and then maybe just a couple of housekeeping things. So,
LG,
my
I'm
journey,
sorry. Is she coming in low or is it just me?
It's just you, Yoko. You're very low.
Oh, okay. I got to uh, continue, please. Yeah.
okay, great. So, the Book of Enoch was a journey. I had always known about it, but because it wasn't in the Bible that I, carried to church on Sundays, um, I just really didn't give it any thought at all, to be honest with you. It just wasn't part of my world. And when I began searching for the truth and what we would call waking up to those truths, there were many different avenues that I researched, from the shape of the earth um, to election fraud to religion, all different facets that I was searching. And no matter what I was looking at, there was this common underlying denominator, and it was the Book of Enoch. And that is how I was able to validate many different theories. They were once called conspiracy theories, but they are validated by the Book of Enoch. And I won't go into any of those. Those are for different times. But that was my journey to the Book of Enoch. And it is something that you have to read and or listen to more than once. Each time you go through the Book of Enoch, which is actually parables, and it's split up in different sections based on parables into three. So the more that you go through those, the more that you realize what the parable is saying, who's saying it, and what generation it is actually speaking of. And so with that, that kind of moves into the housekeeping a little bit. Of course, this is Yoko's channel, but one thing that might be helpful is as we go through the first 10 chapters and the chapters after this, is if you want to jot down a question that you have that comes to mind, and if it's something that the Spirit moves you that you need to ask that question right then, please interrupt and ask Yoko to pause. You can just say pause, and she will, and we'll address that question right then and there. But if it's not a spirit moved in the moment, then just jot that down on a paper, and then we'll have a brief Q&A after that. And right now I'm going to land the plane by saying that some questions that come up early on is they do not understand when Enoch is talking about Noah's generation or a future distant generation. So there is a need to make that distinction. And if any of those questions come up, just jot those down. So I'll hand it back over to you, Yoko.
Okay, we're gonna play the first first 9 chapters. At the end of 9, I will put it on pause, and it's about 11 and 22 minutes, and I'll set it up.
These are the words of the blessing of Enoch, according to which he blessed the chosen and righteous who must be present on the day of distress, which is appointed for the removal of all the wicked and impious. And Enoch began his story and said, There was a righteous man whose eyes were opened by the Lord, and he saw a holy vision in the heavens, which the angels showed to me. And I heard everything from them, and I understood what I saw, but not for this generation, but for a distant generation that will come. Concerning the chosen I spoke, and I uttered a parable concerning them. The Holy and Great One will come out of his dwelling, and the eternal God will tread from there upon Mount Sinai, and he will appear with his host, and will appear in the strength of his power from heaven. And all will be afraid, and the watchers will shake, and fear and great trembling will seize them, up to the ends of the earth. And the high mountains will be shaken, and the high hills will be laid low and will melt like wax in a flame. And the earth will sink, and everything that is on earth will be destroyed, and there will be judgment upon all, and upon all the righteous. But for the righteous he will make peace, and he will keep safe the chosen, and mercy will be upon them. They will all belong to God, and will prosper and be blessed, and the light of God will shine on them. And behold, he comes with 10,000 holy ones to execute judgment upon them, and to destroy the impious, and to contend with all flesh concerning everything that the sinners and the impious have done and wrought against him. Contemplate all the events in the sky, how the lights in the sky do not change their courses, how each rises and sets in order, each at its proper time, and they do not transgress their law. Consider the earth, and understand from the work that is done upon it, from the beginning to the end, that no work of God changes as it becomes manifest. Consider the summer and the winter, how the whole earth is full of water, and the clouds and dew and rain rest upon it. Contemplate and see how all the trees appear withered, and all their leaves are stripped, with the exception of the 14 trees, which are not stripped, which remain with the old leaves until the new come after 2 or 3 years. And again contemplate the days of summer, how at its beginning the sun is above it. You seek shelter and shade because of the heat of the sun, and the earth burns with scorching heat, and you cannot tread upon the earth or upon a rock because of its heat. Contemplate how the trees are covered with green leaves and bear fruit, and understand in respect of everything, and perceive how he who lives forever made all these things for you, and how his works are before him in each succeeding year, and all his works serve him and do not change, but as God has decreed, so everything is done. And consider how the seas and rivers together complete their task. But you have not persevered in, nor observed the law of the Lord. But you have transgressed, and have spoken proud and hard words with your unclean mouth against his majesty. You hard of heart, you will not have peace. And because of this you will curse your days, and the years of your life you will destroy. And the eternal curse will increase, and you will not receive mercy. In those days you will transform your name into an eternal curse to all the righteous, and they will curse you sinners forever. For the chosen there will be light, joy, and peace, and they will inherit the earth. But for you, the impious, there will be a curse. When wisdom is given to the chosen, they will all live, and will not again do wrong, either through forgetfulness or through pride. But those who possess wisdom will be humble. They will not again do wrong, and they will not be judged in all the days of their life, and they will not die of wrath or anger, but they will complete the number of days of their life, and their life will grow in peace, and the years of their joy will increase in gladness and eternal peace, all the days of their life. And it came to pass, when the sons of men had increased, that in those days there were born to them fair and beautiful daughters, and the angels, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, Come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the children of men, and let us beget for ourselves children. And Shemyaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear that you may not wish this deed to be done, and that I alone will pay for this great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and bind one another with curses, so not to alter this plan, but to carry out this plan effectively. Then they all swore together, and all bound one another with curses to it. And they were in all 200, and they came down on Artis, which is the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called the mountain Hermon, because on it they swore and bound one another with curses. And these are the names of their leaders: Shemyaza, who was their leader, Urakiba, Ramel, Kokabiel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Daniel, Ezekiel, Barakiel, Asael, Armaros, Badariel, Ananel, Zachiel, Samsiel, Sadariel, Turiel, Yomiel, and Sariel. These are the leaders of the 200 angels, and all the others with them. And they took wives for themselves, and everyone chose for himself one each. And they began to go into them, and were promiscuous with them. And they taught them charms and spells, and they showed them the cutting of roots and trees. And they became pregnant and bore large giants, and their height was 3,000 cubits. These devoured all the toil of men until men were unable to sustain them, and the giants turned against them in order to devour men. And they began to sin against birds and against animals and against reptiles and against fish, and they devoured one another's flesh and drank the blood from it. Then the earth complained about the lawless ones. And Azazel taught men to make swords and daggers and shields and breastplates, and he showed them the things after these, and the art of making them, bracelets and ornaments, and the art of making up the eyes, and of beautifying the eyelids, and the most precious stones, and all kinds of colored dyes. And the world was changed. And there was great impiety and much fornication, and went astray, and all their ways became corrupt. Amazarach taught all those who cast spells and cut roots, Amaros the release of spells, and Barachiel astrologers, and Kokabiel portents, and Tamiel taught astrology, and Asaradel taught the path of the moon. And at the destruction of men they cried out, and their voices reached heaven.
People are burning 67 pounds as they sleep by simply adding a pinch of this tropical ingredient.
And then Michael, Gabriel, Zuriel, and Uriel looked down from heaven and saw the mass of blood that was being shed on the earth, and all the iniquity that was being done on the earth. And they said to one another, "Let the devastated earth cry out with the sound of their cries up to the gate of heaven." And now to you, O holy ones of heaven, the souls of men complain, saying, "Bring our complaint before the Most High." And they said to their Lord, the King, "Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, your glorious throne endures for all the generations of the world, and blessed and praised. You have made everything, and power over everything is yours, and everything is uncovered and open in front of you, and you see everything, and there is nothing that can be hidden from you. See then that what Azazel has done, how he has taught all iniquity on the earth, and revealed the eternal secrets that are made in heaven." And Simyaza made known spells, he to whom you gave authority to rule over those who are with him. And they went into the daughters of men together, lay with those women, became unclean, and revealed to them these sins. And the women bore giants, and thereby the whole earth has been filled with blood and iniquity. And now behold, the souls which have died cry out and complain unto the gate of heaven, and their lament has ascended, and they cannot go out into the face of the iniquity which is being committed on the earth. And you know everything before it happens, and you know this, and what concerns each of them, but you say nothing to us. What ought we to do with them about this?
Welcome, Snowbird.
Hello, how are you?
Good. LG, you want to take over?
Sure. Okay. So that got us through, what were we at? 9 point. Did you make note of that, Yoko?
9.11. So that was
Okay.
at 11 minutes and 22 seconds into the audio.
Okay. Well, and so we are just kind of practicing. This is the point that we would do the Q&A and maybe just open the floor up for any clarifications. Remember when we started it, I said that there are certain parts when you have to really concentrate and make the distinction of whether Enoch is talking about Noah's generation or the distant generation. So we heard him mention that distant generation, but at this point, we're still dealing with, Genesis 6 and all that brought about. So was there any discussion about that to that point? And hey, David, so good to see you.
Hey, it's good to see y'all too. And I want to apologize. I'm in my car, so I probably won't be able to interact very much, but I did want to listen. I'm very sorry.
Perfect. That's perfect.
We're just happy you're here.
I did have a question, LG, about something that we heard. The fallen angels, they named the leaders of them, and I noticed, or in the book, the leaders were named, and one of them was Amorose, and it brought to mind that woman that worked with Trump, Amorosa, and it just kind of clicked something. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
No, I thought about that too. I think hers was started with a O, like Omarosa, and then his was Amorosa. And the names of those 20 leaders are so difficult to pronounce that a lot of them, uh, almost are, I won't say they're synonymous, but, I don't know one from the other until they start explaining which one taught uh, what type of craft and all of that. But I know that in the chapters to come, there's a really, really strong statement. And I may pronounce the leader's name wrong, but is it Azazel? Where God says, "Write all sin against Azazel." I may have the wrong one, but
It's right.
nonetheless. Yeah, yeah. So he was, and that's that just that statement could be a whole conversation about writing all the sin against the leader, of course, but he knew it was all going to be written against him, which is why he did his whole speech on the Mount. I fear that, I'm going to take all the blame for this, so let's make this pact. So he knew, so it makes sense, but there are some people, because of that statement, and I don't have the answer to this, but because of that statement, that some people think that they're using that name as another name for Satan, the same way that they would use some of the others. I think they're two distinct, different people. But in that thought is the question, if all sin was written on him, then what sin is written on Satan. So I haven't reconciled through any of that yet, but it's interesting to ponder.
By the way,
Yeah.
Snowbird, we could hear you just fine when you spoke in the car. So if you have something to add or that could be helpful, we're all ears.
Yeah, I just got my Chick-fil-A, so I'm good.
All right.
Yeah, I do have a little input on that, and that is, so I know I did those videos on Satan, and Azazel was one of the characters that I investigated, and I don't remember all the sources, but I know one source that specifically links Azazel and Satan, and essentially says Azazel is the serpent in the garden, and that's the Apocalypse of Abraham. It's an apocryphal writing that I think I did a video recently on that, but so I just want to bring that to the table. I do believe Azazel is Satan, and that's one of the reasons.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that kind of helps me round out my ambiguity that I had about it because of that statement, write all sin against him. And I'm just like, Satan cannot be left out of that. So it that closes that question for me that it is the same entity. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Thank
The
you.
other thing that makes me think of too, I just want to mention because I think it's important, is the whole ceremony or ritual that the Jews do on the scapegoat. And a lot of people, I'm not 100% sure on this, but to me, the scapegoat, which in Hebrew is named Azazel, on him they place the sins of the people, and then they walk him into the wilderness to the desert places where the demons essentially live, and he dies. So that's something else to think about, that symbology there. Now, there's another goat in that ritual that is for the priests, and that one is killed on the altar for the priests, which might be a representation of Christ, but then the scapegoat that is called Azazel gets the sin of the people placed on him, and he goes out and dies in the wilderness. So it's just a very interesting symbolic ritual ceremony they do there before their Days of Atonement.
Wow. And for some reason, that makes me think of the, oh, where it's like they bring him out. I guess this is towards the end of Revelations, but I don't know if I'm listening to Wano Savin too much where I'm calling him a worm, but he brings him out to the righteous, hands over to the righteous, and the righteous is kind of like this, this thing, this thing is what corrupted the world. Is that, do you have any comment about that, or is that not quite biblical?
I don't have any comment. I mean, Wano Savin's, I think he's a great guy. I think he's a lot of good. I know that.
You're broken up a little, Snowbird.
Oh, okay.
Your
The
rubber
car
band.
moving might be not good, so yeah, I'll stop then.
Yeah,
I have
you
a
were
question.
rubber banding.
Yeah.
So maybe you can come back in with that. I'll just say, as far as Wano Savin, uh, just like my, I guess, preface is that I think that he had a role which was to make people understand that this was biblical. And he told a lot of the biblical stories, but he also attempts to talk in parodies as well, which can be confusing. You know, are these your parodies, or is this actually uh, not a parody? I'm sorry, a parable. Um, so he served his season to let everyone know this is biblical, but I don't know exactly how factual when you get down to the nitty gritty parts of it. That's a kind of a safe statement.
Yeah. I have a question about the what we just saw. Okay, or just heard. The so my question is that I understand that by them introducing to humanity by the angels, the fallen angels, introducing astrology, or the roots and herbs. I know that they use it for magic and things. That's no good. But there are other things that are pretty good and all. So so I am a little bit confused. I mean, what were we? Okay, let's say if these guys did not come down, and I mean, what were we? What was humanity intended for? I mean, these are our culture right now. Whatever they introduce is in our culture. So that has we had adopted. But what were we intended for? What was? Do, can anybody answer that? From because that's when I looked at all these things they're called sin, and I'm like, oh my God. So why are they called sin? We're not. So God did not want us to learn those. But what are we supposed to do? Because we're going to move on to the new things. So what are we supposed to go towards and get rid of?
Well, it was about corruption, and this is just me postulating, but God's plan for Adam and Eve, I'm sure, was to procreate and all of that, but he had a different way, a different everything, um, a different connection. So the act of creating another life, I believe God had wanted it to be a certain way, and he was going to teach them that way. But Satan corrupted it. And this is where, just as a woman in this world, and I'm sure men too, I come back to the same thing. And that is, this whole entire world was corrupted by sex. But then, as your studies take you further and further, you realize that while that statement is true, that wasn't the agenda of those fallen angels. That was a manifestation and a way to implement what they wanted to do. And what they wanted to do was contaminate the DNA. And they did it in those ways back then, and they've done it in every way that they can possibly think of since then. This also scares me about all of the new technologies. And now, I won't even go into the med beds and all of that. But when someone wants to manipulate my DNA in any way, I go back to Genesis chapter 6. They've been trying to contaminate and destroy God's creation since the very beginning, and they used sex and all of that to do it. And as far as what they taught, they use that against, and even the Satanists now, they think that God withheld knowledge and that Satan enlightened them and gave them the knowledge that God should have given them. It's just this whole perversion of knowledge and the desire for it. But maybe God would have given us the knowledge of metals, but he would have done it in his way. When the fallen angels did it in their way, it was to teach them to murder other human beings and to yield power. And when they taught them to make up their eyes, maybe that's okay with God. We'll never know, because they taught it in a way that created temptation and promiscuity. Promiscuity. I can't say that word all of a sudden, but it went a different direction. Everything went towards the wrong direction. So I don't know the answer to your question. I just know that we never got to find out because it was corrupted from the onset. And I yield.
Well, you just answered it. You answered it because they perversed whatever was God wanted to teach us. They perversed it. They contaminated. They tainted it. Yep. Have you all noticed that the last sentence was 9:11 was 9.11, 9 chapter. It said it was pretty much ask, talking to God, the author or the person, Enoch, saying that you know about all, but you did not. Did I get that part?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's part of when, like, Abel's blood cried up from the ground. That's how God knew that what had happened. But basically, the angels went to petition God and saying, all of this is going on because you see and know everything, but yet you don't tell us what to do about it. You're not acting about it. And this is what people don't understand, and I'm people, I'm part of it. But this went on for 1,000 years. Now, Noah built his ark. He had what for 120 years? He had 120 years of that 1,000 years to prepare. But God let that go on for 1,000 years because, see, he has covenants with the beings that he created, and God can't not keep his word, and a covenant is his word. So he has covenants to fulfill with these entities and beings and principalities. And I think that's what I struggle with, because that whole entire 1,000 years that the Nephilim were doing all of this, he knew he was going to have to do the flood because he's omnipotent. And so he knew what the outcome was going to be, which is that he was going to have to end them. But yet he still allowed that if they would have turned around and, you know, left their wicked ways behind, he probably wouldn't have flooded the earth. So even those Nephilim beasts, he still gave them 1,000 years to not be what they were being at the expense of his creation. But we have to just come to understand that there was some type of covenant in place that he had to honor. That's just my thoughts.
Covenant. If he is the Almighty, then what is the covenant with? Was it with the angels, or who is it with the councils? With who? I mean, this is like, or
Every
is this
single thing, every single thing he created, he has a covenant with. When we get further into Enoch, you'll see that there's holding places that Enoch is shown where stars, actual stars, like twinkle, twinkle little stars, are being held there because they broke their covenant with God. They did not keep the path, the timing, the whatever their way they were created to do, they deviated from it. And this is just a star. So every single thing that God makes, he has a covenant with that. And so when he made the archangels, when everything he makes is eternal, even us. We just are the only ones that have a physical experience and a physical death before that eternity. Every angel, everything he has a covenant with, which is they were created for a purpose and they serve that purpose. And if they deviate from that purpose, they have broken their covenant with him, and he addresses that. And that's what it means, the great judgment day. He will judge every blade of grass, everything, everything, because he created everything.
thank you. I just wanted, because it's about Enoch, and I was talking to LG, also to Aria about it. I did a deco on where was Enoch born. I just want to kind of put it in recording, put it on record. The deco came back. Enoch was born um, on Mars or in Mars, not the Mars. It's not that what most people or the cabal say it is. It's the Mars that's outer land, that Mars. So that's where, according to the decode, that's where Enoch was born. As far as where did he move to, where did he go, I haven't gone that far. But this is his birthplace, according to the decode.
Yeah, and when Yoko and I were talking earlier, and she's referring to the Mars, which is beyond the ice wall. And there's certain maps where you can see that those, what we would call the unknown lands now, but at one time they were the known lands. There's a lot of planetary names such as Venus, Mars, Jupiter, the ones that we're used to from a constellation standpoint. But as I was telling Yoko, when Enoch was born, he was sixth from Adam, meaning he was the seventh generation of man. Now, Adam and Eve would have already been removed from the garden, which is at the Polaris axis, and we're down by 3 and 5. So, up at the Polaris axis is where the Garden of Eden was. And there's 4 quadrants and 4 rivers, just like our heart. 4 chambers, 4 arteries. It's the same. So it makes sense that Enoch, only being the 7th generation of man, they would not have migrated very far from that Polaris axis. And the distance from that Polaris axis to the now unknown and frozen lands where Mars continent would be feasible and viable for that decode to be tangible.
Well, that's all that.
And ladies, that may be a good place to end it. I have a 8 o'clock that I have to be sure and get logged into. It's a Zoom call, but this has been great, and I enjoyed our audience, and I hope that all of those that get to see it on the replay enjoy it as well. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
LG.
Yes, LG,
And
your study that you have put into the Book of Enoch is recognized and greatly appreciated, that you share all that you've learned. And thank you very much. And thank you, Yoko.
well, thank you. And this concludes the Book of Enoch, the first session. And then next Thursday, we'll have the second one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, good job, Yoko.